I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, and I'm coming at you from the parking lot of a Sheetz. If you are from Pennsylvania, you'll know about the Wawa versus Sheetz argument that I guess people have who are from Pennsylvania. But if you don't know what I'm talking about on either of those counts, both of these chains are gas station convenience stores types things. Kind of think like a 7-Eleven, but like with fast food, and not just like sandwiches, but also like burgers, or they have a full kitchen back there making things. You order on a screen and then they send it out to you. Probably sounds so stupid that I'm explaining this right now to people who, have grown up with it, but it was completely revolutionary when I moved to the East Coast. So in the parking lot of a Sheetz, I'm playing a fun new game this week. I'm traveling for work and seeing how many things I can just, do in my car. I did an interview for a neat little side hustle yesterday. That went really well. And I did that for my car at a rest stop. And here we are recording the intro for this episode. So it just keeping things interesting, I guess. I'm super excited to get into my conversation with this week's guest. Guests, plural. It is Jennifer and Stephanie. They're quantum relationship coaches. And they talk about their relationship and the ups and downs that they've had to work through and how they help people to kind of combine psychology and spirituality. And I just figured it would be a good episode for Valentine's Day. They're lovely people, and I had such a blast chatting with them. I'm going to keep this short, but I did, I feel like I keep having to mention this. I did record this podcast episode quite some time ago. And, there are some things mentioned about my former partner in the episode, in this conversation. And, a lot of it still stands. I still maintain that my former partner came into my life for a reason. I learned so much from him. And I maintain the whole thought of I love you, but I love me more. And it's been quite a journey, a difficult journey at times, but quite a journey to fall even more in love with myself as I go. So I'm grateful for that lesson too. It's so important. And, in retrospect, just the pandemic, man, the pandemic took a hit on everybody. It took a hit on people's concept of self. It took a hit on relationships. I definitely think that the pandemic contributed to my breakup. So, hey, that's a question I have. How has the pandemic affected your relationships, your friendships, your romantic relationships? Obviously, if you're dating, it's harder to date now. Tell me about it. WineDineAllPortsOpen.com. And I guess the last thing I'll say on the topic of my former partner is I truly do want him to be happy. And, okay, that's not with me. But I really do. That's all I've ever wanted, is for him to be happy. Look how far I've come. All right, that's it. I have to eat these cheese curds and then get back on the road. But I'm super excited for you to listen to this conversation. Oh, and Jennifer and Stephanie also wanted me to mention that they are going to be doing a 6-week relationship reboot for individuals and couples. This is starting Saturday, February 19th. That's next week at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This will run each Saturday for an hour for 6 weeks total, and I will put the link to sign up in the episode notes. Okay, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. This life that we are living is full of ups and downs, but you know what? We're going to make it. All right, cutting to a quick commercial break, and then please enjoy my conversation with quantum relationship coaches and couple, Stephanie and Jennifer. Do you find yourself struggling between the choices of playing the latest video games you got for Christmas or debating Aunt Fanny about religion over Christmas dinner?
Do you find yourself trying to work video games into your school papers, Sunday sermon, or next book proposal?
Do you wish you had more people to argue with about the hidden philosophical meaning of your favorite RPG?
Well then, nerds, we are the podcast for you.
No Avatars Allowed is a podcast about video games, theology, and all things cultural and intellectual.
Oh, and we talk about sex a lot, too.
Our hosts Rachel Dalton, Ben Wallace, and Joshua Wise figure out each week how on earth to cram video games into some kind of bigger discussion.
And mostly, we make it work.
Check us out every Saturday morning on allportsopen.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So grab your controller, that unused copy of Thomas Aquinas that's sitting on your shelf, and maybe a negligee, and come join us for what is certain to be an interesting and strange conversation on No Avatars Allowed.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited to introduce you to my guests today. I have Stephanie and Jennifer here. How are you both doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Doing well, thanks.
Good. Yeah, I'm excited to get into what we're going to talk about today. Let's kind of just start with you telling me a little bit about each of you as individuals and about your relationship together, and just kind of tell me your story.
Okay. Well, I'm Jennifer, so you can hopefully discern our voices. It's always interesting when we're having a podcast episode and you hear all these different voices. So anyway, I am Jennifer, and I am originally from the East Coast in the United States. We now live in the Midwest together in Ohio. But,
Ooh.
My beginning was pretty just generalized. I have one sister who's older than myself. I am a child of divorce. So my parents did divorce when I was 10. And, that was a little bit of a challenge. I was raised by my mom, my sister raised by my dad. So we were kind of separated for many years of our life as siblings. We have been married for a little more than a year at this point, been together for 12, but we'll get a little bit into our story because we, as many relationships, had some rocky time and in fact broke up for 2.5 years in the middle of our relationship. And so again, we'll talk more about that, but we have a 17-year-old son, and he is the light of our life most of the time. But, when you're talking about teenagers, that's
Yes.
kind of very common. And some days it's like, oh, I love you. And some days it's like, oh, my goodness.
How many days until you're 18?
Right.
Right.
Did I raise you? Did I really raise you, or did the wolves? So anyway, that kind of brings us to who we are. But we are relationship coaches. But again, we'll talk more about that too and what it is that we do, because we call ourselves quantum relationship coaches because we really look at mind, body, and spirit in how we are affected by our universe and how we affect our universe. So we really look at a very big picture, not just us as, this human being and the other human being in our relationships in life. So that's kind of a little bit of a very broad overview of who I am. I'll let Stephanie tell you a little bit of her broad overview, and then, we can talk more definitely about, what brought us to who we are today.
Absolutely.
So I'm Stephanie, and by trade, I'm a clinical social worker moving into the coaching world because I wanted to have more freedom to really dig deeply with people in a different way than the mental health world. And I was born and raised in this Midwestern area that we're in right now, in a very small town about 20 miles outside of Toledo.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so close to my hometown.
Oh my gosh, where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from East Lansing, Michigan.
Oh my gosh,
oh goodness, yes.
yes.
We're Toledo. Toledo exactly where that
very
is.
Close, very, very close. Yeah,
Yes.
I live on the East Coast now in Philadelphia, but I'm Midwest girl. Yeah.
Very
Okay,
cool.
all
Yes.
right.
I spent 17 years living on the East Coast, which I loved and I still miss. Yeah. Those are good days. So I did have an interesting childhood. I have 3 younger brothers who are delights. um, and lived out in the country, and so I was the proverbial tomboy who was out in the forest playing with frogs and finding critters and jumping into the lakes and stuff like that throughout that. And then I graduated from high school and ran away from home to the East Coast, where I thought I would find more fun, which I did for a long time. I came out when I was 29 after finishing undergrad. I met someone, a female, in my last year of undergrad and fell head over heels for her and realized, oh, I'm not straight after all. And have been in a few relationships. With Jennifer is my longest relationship, and we are going strong at this point. I love to talk about spirituality. I love to talk about trauma. Those are both places that I find to be so vibrant and full of just richness, where we
Yes.
can lean into our best selves when we get through those things. And I believe that trauma and spirituality are, our trauma keeps us from our spirituality. And so healing the trauma allows us to
Yes.
lean in to our spirituality more. So that's definitely an area that we work on and is a deep fascination for me. So
And why we're doing coaching, because as
yeah.
Stephanie said,
Mm-hmm.
she was very restricted in that mental health model,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with clients, and you really have to be very, very careful when you start talking about spirituality.
Definitely.
Billing an insurance company.
Absolutely.
So,
Right.
that was one of the biggest things that's what brought us back together when our relationship fell apart, was our spiritual teaching. It's finding our spiritual teaching that really resonated and allowed us to grow into who we are today. So it is a big part of what we do. But we also are very broad in the area that, whatever your spiritual belief is where you need to go. So, we have folks that are that were raised in the Jehovah Witness. We have Christian folks. We have folks that are Buddhist in our program, in our group. So we aren't saying you must follow the teaching that we follow. What we are saying is you just need to look at the big picture and
Sure.
know that
Sure.
there is an energy in the world that really is where we all come from. And so, for folks that maybe are just starting to dabble in their understanding of their spirituality, or maybe have unfortunately had a bad way, because many folks in the LGBT community, depending on their religious upbringing, have been shunned, as much as called an abomination. So we
Ugh,
know
yeah.
about that as well. So, we do help people heal from that type of trauma too. That's part of the trauma work that we help people with. So, spirituality is a big piece of who we are.
That's beautiful. What are your backgrounds with spirituality? Were you raised in a particular sect of religion? I'm just kind of curious.
I was raised Methodist,
Okay.
and an incredibly conservative church was where I came of age. I was very, very liberal personally, and so I didn't really understand all that vibe, but it certainly was an interesting place to grow up, with lots of rules and regulations and things that just didn't make sense for me. So I started pushing back against it by the time I was a late teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved away from it and really studied Taoism, Buddhism, and lots of metaphysical things. And so that's been my trajectory. And now I'm very much steeped in like the metaphysical world of spirituality.
Beautiful.
And for me, I was raised Jewish.
Okay.
My father was raised in a very strict Orthodox upbringing. My mother was in a much more relaxed, more cultural Jewish upbringing. So when they got together, we were raised in more the cultural aspect of our Judaism. I think my father was kind of rebelling against all of the rules and regulations that were put upon him, as a child. So we were more cultural Jews. The belief in God was there, and the major holidays were celebrated with the family, but there wasn't like this really strong understanding or regulated aspect of growing up for me. So after my parents separated and divorced, again, it was just very cultural. I mean, we would get
Right.
together for Hanukkah and we would have Passover Seder with, the grandparents, but that was like it. So I lost a lot of my connection growing up. And in my 20s and 30s, I started to try to reach back out and get involved in the Jewish community. And then, of course, when I had my son, I really wanted to give him, I guess, what I felt I didn't have. And so he went to the Hebrew Academy for, the beginning part of his education. And I tried to put him in that box of, you're going to religious school, you're going to have a bar mitzvah. And he rebelled. And I let him at that point because I just didn't, there was always something missing and I didn't know what it was, because I believed that this was the religion I was born in. So this is where I need to be and what I need to follow. And I need to figure out how to make it work for me. And it had nothing to do with my sexuality because I was not shunned. I just didn't feel like I fit in. And it wasn't until we separated and, I kind of hit that bottom. We all kind of have those moments in our life where we hit rock bottom. That was my bottom when we separated. And so I had to figure out how to love me. And that's what connected me with the metaphysical belief system, spirituality that I follow now. And it gave me my life back. And it was interesting because we both found that exact path when we were separated, and neither one of us talked about it. So it wasn't like one of us said, hey, you need to look into this. Obviously, it was divine timing. And we both ended up later on figuring out that we were following the same beliefs. Stephanie came in to see me one day. I think she may have been coming to pick up our son for a visit. And she saw A Course in Miracles sitting on my nightstand. And if you're familiar, any of your readers are familiar with A Course in Miracles, it's over 1,000 pages. So it's a very large text physically. So there it was sitting on my nightstand and her jaw almost dropped.
It did drop.
It did drop.
Like, what is happening here? She was completely against anything that I had been connected with because she was so focused on her Judaism. And so she has this book in her room and I'm like, I don't understand. I can't compute this. But we did end up both, I said, I'm studying that. What are you doing with it? She's like, oh, I joined a group that studies ACIM. And I just was like, I don't know what to say. So, but we ended up at the same spiritual center. I did invite her. Spirit told me I needed to, apparently, because all of a sudden out of my mouth pops, well, you should come to the spiritual center where I was studying the Course in Miracles. Now, we were barely speaking at that point. So it was after I said it, I was like, oh, rewind that. I can't unsay it now. But she came and I figured, oh, she won't stay because she doesn't like what I like when it comes to spirituality. She stayed. She loved it. She fell in love. And then we studied The Way of Mastery, which is another spiritual text. And going through that, in the class that we were in, we found our forgiveness for ourselves and for each other and were able to be friends. And then she asked me to start dating again, or to, was there a chance for us? And for 2 years I had said, no. And then that day I said, let me think about it. And I did. And I said, well, how about if we just casually date for a while and see how things go? And we did. And it took another probably 5 or 6 months for us to get through what we needed to get through together casually and just dating to realize that, okay, we can do this. And we started getting closer and closer. And then a year and a half later, I think we got married. So,
yeah. And then we started teaching The Way of Mastery after we took it. Because our spiritual leaders left town, they moved on to another spiritual center in another state. And the class, once it starts in January, it goes because there's a lesson a month. And the way they were teaching it, it was a lesson a week. So the way they taught it, even though it's a 3-year training program, they did it in a year. So they were doing a lesson a week instead of a lesson a month. And here was this class that, now at the end of March was losing their teachers. So we stepped up and continued to teach it for 3 years. And that sort of was the catalyst of becoming coaches, because we saw how well we worked together in teaching what we were teaching at the time, which was obviously a little more narrow because it was only the way of mastery and metaphysics. And so it just healed our relationship. And we were like, you know what? We need to start helping other people, because we've come up with, some really tangent things that work and that help create that connection between two people. And, I also have to say that relationships are not just about having a significant other. It's the relationship you have with your children, your parents, the people in the grocery store, your boss. So everything that we teach are important skills in any relationship. So unless you live in a cave on top of a mountain and do not interact with anybody, what we teach is for people. Because we've had people say, well, but I'm not in a relationship. It's like, okay, well then what do you need to do to prepare yourself for that most amazing relationship? So, that just has become our passion. And we also know what it's like to be living in the heteronormative world as relationship coaches and as a couple, that there are times that we may be somewhere that people don't like who we are just because of who we represent.
Sure.
So we really can help people and love to help people overcome some of these challenges that face us in the world.
That's incredible. And I mean, you were talking about trauma a little bit earlier too, which is a topic that I also love talking about, even if it's a little dark. And that plays into it too. I mean, when you come into the world as a child pure, and then, all of these things get put on you from society, from your parents, from all of these different people, and you have these experiences. And so like part of, what I've been trying to do is connecting to this inner child and remembering what it's like to not have that weight. And so I think that, in a heteronormative society, being able to kind of shed those expectations through spirituality is a really cool process.
Yes, indeed it is. And isn't that, I mean, it's funny. We think of spirituality as growth and, going to God or, connecting with our divinity, but it's almost a regression back to our original self. It's remembering exactly who we were born to be and taking off, shedding all of those skins that we've put on throughout our lifetime, that we were told and it was inferred that we needed to have in order to fit in and to be accepted and loved. And now we're finding out that I still don't feel loved. I'm 51 years old. And until the past few years, I didn't even know what it felt like to be loved because I had all these layers of conditions on me.
And all this armor protecting yourself.
Right, because of all the things that have happened to me that I didn't even know what love felt like. And then I started taking all of that stuff off and seeing what it really was, looking at things with radical acceptance and forgiving things and all that good stuff.
Being vulnerable.
Yes. And then I started to actually be able to feel love. And oh my gosh, what a beautiful experience it's been.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I mean, if you don't mind me asking, going backwards a little bit, as you were kind of just talking about, what was, kind of the downfall when you two decided to separate?
Well, it was kind of a domino effect. When we first met,
how that goes.
when we first met, Stephanie had just finished grad school. So she was kind of starting her new career over, now as a licensed social worker, as opposed to only having a bachelor's degree prior. And, sometimes a bachelor's degree in psychology, which we both have, is not much more than a glorified high school diploma.
Hey, so I'm a theater major. I know how that goes.
Right. Yep. Same thing.
It basically sets you up to flip burgers at Mickey D's, right?
Yeah.
Same thing, and I had already finished my master's degree maybe 5 or 6 years prior. So I was already kind of in my career.
You were mid-career.
I was mid-career. I was middle management at a housing authority, running their social service department for a very large housing authority here in Toledo. And so Stephanie was just finishing grad school. So she was kind of starting over with her new career. So we both were very career driven. My son at the time was 5. So when I met Stephanie, I was a single mom. And so single mom, career driven, nothing was going to stop me. It just was, I was on this path and I was, very focused on what I was doing. And then a medical procedure occurred. I had a horseback riding accident as a child. So I've had some physical issues that have happened over the years that, had left me with some chronic pain issues that I've also dealt with. So I had the opportunity to have a medical procedure that was going to help me stop taking some of the medications that I was taking to control pain. And the medical procedure, unfortunately, didn't go as planned. And it left me with even another problem. And it took away my career. I became physically disabled. And so I guess I would say it began a downward spiral for me because I had lost my sense of who I was, because I felt that my career was who I was. I didn't know who I truly was. I didn't know my authentic self, my spiritual being, only having a human experience. So I became a victim of the world. And so that was what happened to me in that moment. Because I did not have that spiritual connection. And I'll let Stephanie tell you where she kind of jumped in on this.
Right.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, I had these three brothers and I had helped raise them. And so I was over having kids, but I was in a codependent family where I was kind of the superhero. Whenever anything needed to get done, I was the one who stepped in to do it. And so I was very well acquainted with the superhero costume. And when Jennifer got hurt, when we first got together a year before she got hurt, it was really hard for me to decide to join the relationship because there was a 5-year-old involved.
Sure.
I was terrified. There's no other way to call it. I was just absolutely terrified because I didn't want to screw up a kid.
That's a lot of pressure.
Right? And he's 5 years old.
5.
I didn't get the first couple of years to get used to this. It was
right.
I have a 5-year-old who can think and talk. Oh,
right.
Geez.
I mean, he was finishing nursery school and getting ready to start kindergarten when we met. So this wasn't okay, he's a teenager, so he's already kind of raised. I only need a few more years of investment. Right. This is
formative
he just
years.
turned 5.
You're signing on to help raise this human being.
Right.
Yes.
And I was totally in love with him. I thought he was the bee's knees. Absolutely. But I was really scared. And because I knew well that superhero costume and I was so worried about failing both of them that I put that on and I never took it off. And when she got hurt, I think I put on another layer of superhero costume. Well, now I have to be her caregiver. I have to make sure the kid's okay. I'm taking care of the house. I have a new career in social work. So I'm taking care of all these clients. And I got so overwhelmed.
And we lost my salary.
And we lost her salary.
Which was the higher of the two at the time.
Right.
Stephanie
Domino
was just starting
effect
out.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So there's all these worries. And
we were only 1 year in.
Yeah. I mean, we really hadn't, we had barely settled into a relationship at that point.
It's a lot of pressure.
It was a lot of pressure. And we made it work for another 5 years, but I became more and more buried by the responsibilities. We moved to a new city, we moved out to the desert, hoping that it would help Jennifer feel better. That did not work. It was Las Vegas. I absolutely despised it from the minute we drove into the city. And
dark energy.
Oh, dark energy. And it took me several months to get my license so that I could practice social work. I got jobs. At one point I was working 3 jobs because it was more expensive out there. And I was just buried. And eventually I just broke down. And I had tried to talk to Jennifer and, been like, I need more help. We need more assistance. I hired a caregiver to help. And together they did nothing during the day. So I was paying someone to help with the house and the laundry and everything. And she and Jen would just sit and talk all day. And I would come home and there's nothing done. And I'm like, I just paid this person cash money and I still have to do her work. And I really lost my mind. And she couldn't hear me. She was just, I'm fine. But she was so over medicated at that point with all the pain meds she was on. I don't think she could even hear. So she was deeply depressed and over medicated because Las Vegas is very liberal with their opiates.
Yes.
She was not overtaking them, but just what she was on was a very high dosage of things, and she just wasn't herself at all. Telling her that I couldn't be in this relationship anymore wasn't really that hard, even though I knew that it was going to be hard. There was part of it, but I didn't know who I was with anymore.
Yeah.
And when our son was withdrawing from me as well, because we were having trouble, and so he's choosing his bio mom, of course. So I was like, I'm an outsider here. There's nothing that I'm doing that's adding to this family.
Other than finances.
It would be better if I just left. And so I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Unless we turn things around, and I don't know what else more I can do, I have to go. And so I did. And we split up and moved back to Ohio. I did convince her to come back here with me so that I could stay in Ian's life. I was driven to co-parent. But we barely spoke to each other for a good 2 years.
Yeah. Until the book on the bedside table.
The book on the bedside table. That
should be the name. It should be a title for something.
Right. When we write our book.
There we go.
Yeah. When we write our story. Table. You just gave us our title.
There we go.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the catalyst, it sounds like, for
it really was
the way that everything turned around. It's funny that, you say it's a domino effect too, because I always say to my partner, we have this running joke. He'll always do something and I'll be like, hun, it's not about the dishes. It's never about the dishes. So like when I flip or, when we get into a disagreement, his first response is to say, oh, well, I don't know why you're so fixated on that. And I'm always like, hun, it's not about that. It's not about the dishes. And like, that's our thing. That means like, this is a bigger issue that's like kind of under the surface. And this was like the catalyst of the domino. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's usually what happens. It's not just one thing. And that's why like when we tell our story, it's not that I got sick and all of a sudden it was all my fault.
Right. Of course not. Yeah.
There's two sides to the coin, and we both didn't know how to deal with what was going on because we both had unhealed trauma from growing up. I also was the caregiver. My parents divorced. Both my parents were not mentally well. My sister was not mentally well. So I had to kind of take care of everything, but also on the same note, I didn't want to make any waves. So I was very quiet.
Sure. Yeah.
And
you're both the oldest?
No, I'm the baby, actually.
Oh, okay.
But my sister and I are only 15 months apart. So.
And her sister is incredibly immature. So Jen really stepped into the oldest, and her sister moved away when they were 11.
Right.
And so Jen became the only child, and her mom was not well enough to manage the house.
So I had my name on the checking account, everything. Yeah,
she became the mom, the parentified child in the extreme.
Right. By the time I was 14 years old, I took care of all the household finances.
Yeah, talk about lock and what do they call that? Lock and key kid?
Yeah.
Latchkey kid.
Yeah, latchkey kid. Yeah.
Right. And my mother was there.
Yeah.
And she was there. I mean, a lot of times latchkey kids are kind of on their own because their parents are working so much. My mher was depressed, and there were times that we went 6 months where she never got out of bed. So not to say that all of my experiences didn't make me who I am today. So I love my mother, and we were best of friends before she passed, because she unfortunately has been gone for 14 years. She had an aneurysm.
Oh my goodness.
So I did lose my mom. And at that point, she was doing really well. She had been married to an amazing man. They were married 20 years when she passed. So when she finally found the right person, and again, I really do believe that there are so many pieces to make a relationship work.
Absolutely.
And for Stephanie and I, we knew we had a soul contract once we started getting into that spiritual belief and understanding and the messages we received, that we're in a relationship for a reason.
Yeah.
And we have to make this work somehow, but we had to do a lot of self-care, a lot of self-love. And that's one of the biggest things for me. I did not love me. I would tell Stephanie I was fine, but I wasn't fine. And I didn't know how to be fine. I finally, got involved in this program that I did. It was a 40-day class on self-love. And that's where It just
Ooh,
happened to
okay.
be that this self-love class I took was based on A Course in Miracles, which I had never heard of. And I was like, some of this stuff sounds interesting. Maybe I need to kind of look at it.
And it brought you right where you needed to be.
It did.
Exactly.
It brought me there. And then when I was reading that, Stephanie had also sent me something about Esther and Abraham Hicks for anyone who knows about channeled work. And she's like, oh, she's going to think it's hokey. Because, again, I was so focused on my belief in my Judaism. And so she said, I don't even think, I know she was saying to herself, Jennifer's not even going to listen to this. And I did. And I was fascinated. And I told her that. And again, she just gave me this look like, who is this person?
Right? I love it.
And when I think back on that, it's like, why did I even ever send it to her? So there was something spiritually within me that was pushing me to stay connected with her on some level. So, and I just have to say, when I was describing my experience at the end of our relationship, I kind of blamed it all on Jen. But the other half of the story is I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't setting boundaries. Because of my trauma wounds, I didn't know that I deserved better than this. And I just kept pushing myself and putting my real self behind and not taking care of that real self until it broke down. And then I kind of had this kind of catastrophic personal experience of really being a mess. That was all on me. That wasn't Jen's fault. Jen had an accident. Jen had her experience of it. I had my experience of it.
Everybody has their own story.
Yeah, that broke me down. And it was probably one of the better things that's ever happened to me, even though in the moment it was excruciating.
Right.
Because it set me on this path to awakening, where I get to get on podcasts and talk with folks like you and share our story. And hopefully other people can take strength from that and say, ooh, I don't have to live this way. It was my 45th birthday month, and that was when the fall really came for me, because I was looking at the first half of my life and thinking, if I'm going to do 45 more years of this, that's not okay. So
life is short.
So I've either got to fix myself or jump off the planet. That was the only two forks in the road I could see. And I decided to fix myself. And that's what happened.
I love that you both too have these beautiful stories of this individual work that you did by yourself. Like sometimes you need to pull apart to come back together, right? And what advice do you have for somebody who is struggling with self-love? And then I guess like a follow-up to that is kind of, what advice do you have for somebody who, feels like they've done that personal work and wants to reconcile with someone?
I think the very first thing is believe that it can happen, because we have to have that belief. And I didn't for a long time. Jennifer held it. Jennifer held the candle for us for those times. But then the thing is like, you have to own your stuff.
Yeah.
When you get back together. So one of the things that happened for us is when we did start dating again, there were lots of triggers from chapter 1 of our relationship.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And you have to work through those.
Oh, man. And so what we did is, and this is one of our kind of signature tools that we use, is when you feel that trigger, you must identify it as your trigger. So she would say something or do something, or something would happen, and I would say, oh, that feeling is coming up. This is an old feeling. Yep. And I would label it as a trigger, but it's my trigger. She didn't do anything to cause it. I have a trigger. So I totally owned my triggers. So this is what I suggest to people. When you get back together and you have a conversation with your beloved, and you want to be willing to recognize your triggers and be willing to own them. And if you can do that, then your beloved will not be on the defensive and you can get somewhere. But if you both go in pointing fingers at the other person, you're going to get nowhere. Mm-hmm. So point the fingers at yourself, own your stuff, be clear and open and honest about what your desires are, and then do that.
Right. Because then you can open up the conversation without someone feeling defensive.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I always say too, like this idea that you're on a team, like it's you against the problem.
Right.
And I love, your story too, because I used to introduce this podcast by saying this is a podcast about dating, sex, and relationships. And then I realized, I was like, no, you have to tack on self-love to there, because those things are nothing if you don't have that. And so that's kind of the through line of like, whenever I'm talking about sex or whenever I'm talking about dating or like, long-term relationship, self-love is always that through line.
It's so vitally important. And when we talk about the work that we do, that's almost the foundation of it. We talk about leaning into your authentic self, figuring out what your boundaries are, and how to communicate about it all. Those are the 3 tenets that we work through. And people are like, well, what does your authentic self have to do with relationships? It's everything to do with relationship. Because if you come in with a mask on, you don't have a solid foundation. So this is about taking off the armor, taking off the masks, and really falling in love with yourself so that you can show up in your relationships authentically. And then we've got something to go on. And people, like, I think that sometimes people are like, I don't want to work on myself. I want to make sure that I can talk to my partner. It's like, well, let's talk to you first, and then we'll bring in the partner.
Right.
That's how we work. So it's almost, we talk about relationship coaching, but oftentimes we're working with an individual so that they can clean out their own heart so that they can be ready for the relationship.
Definitely. Yeah. That's been a common thing when I talk to people about relationships. It comes up that, some people aren't ready for relationships because that work hasn't been done.
Right. If you keep showing up the same way that you've always shown up, how do you expect to have different results?
Yeah. And it's not your fault. It just means that there's some stuff that needs to be, some gunk that needs to be cleaned out and worked through.
Absolutely. These are unconscious reactions. So we don't even know what it is that's being triggered sometimes because we've just been living on this autopilot for so long. And so our job is really to start to identify what the triggers are underneath the surface and bring those up for healing so that when we do get into a relationship, we can identify that stuff. And that's been the beautiful thing that has helped Jennifer and I grow. I kind of introduced it before, and now we'll just add to it that I don't blame her when I feel yucky inside. I know that it's from my old stuff. I can identify it. And as I'm getting better and better at it, I can see the nuances within me of stuff that comes from when I was 4 years old, 10 years old. And I can identify that as a familiar feeling. So this isn't something that's only happening now. It happened before. And so I need to look at both of those things.
Right.
And identify it and bring it to the surface so that I stop reacting unconsciously to stuff that goes on in our relationship. And this is the same at work, with our son, with my family, with everybody I meet. Who knows what someone might say, what look they might give, what smell they might have that reminds me of something that happened in my past where I have feelings that I've stuffed down. And so if I don't know what those feelings are, I'm reacting to those things from that old wounded place.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important too. Like my big thing is always, it's funny. So I've been in therapy like my entire life, right? I was diagnosed at a very young age with OCD, ADHD, anxiety, etc. And I've always been very therapy focused. I've been going to therapy and I've done so much work of, diving deep and figuring out where these traumas come from. I have some friendship trauma from being bullied as a teenager, and various types of trauma, super fun. But then I was like, wait, how do I change? Because it just felt like when I was going to therapy, I was rehashing. And I was like, no, I know where it comes from. I want to change it now.
Exactly.
And so that I've kind of started getting more interested in being coached. So I guess kind of tell me a little bit about how action steps, you're aware, and then you have this mindfulness surrounding, these various triggers, these traumas that you have. How do you go about shifting them? I mean, I know the first step is obviously awareness, but
absolutely is. And the real process is to look at what it was, look at how it impacted you then and how it's impacting you now, and focusing on that, bringing that mindfulness in to feel it, to accept it, to know it. And we have lots of different processes. And so, I mean, we probably have 100 different tools that we'll bring into play over the course of our work. But that's really what it's about, is
and discerning that the situation today is different.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
we were just working. I was just working with a client yesterday.
yes.
She had a situation happen that, you know, some male person, adult, was acting inappropriate in front of her daughter, who is only like 10 or 11. And it brought her back to trauma she had as a child. And she felt as though she was back in that situation where she was freezing, but she didn't freeze. She immediately got her daughter out of the situation and protected her daughter, and her daughter never saw the inappropriate behavior. So I had to help her see that she didn't react the same way, that it wasn't the same situation, that she was totally had that power to make things happen to protect herself and her daughter. And that, yes, as a child, no, she didn't feel she had the power because she was the child and was being, you know, affected by an adult. So I was able to help her shift to see, no, you didn't react the same way, that this is the way you reacted. And she was able to say, oh, I can move past this and know that because I didn't confront the individual was the right thing to do. Because she was angry at herself for not confronting this man. And I'm like, no, your job was to protect you and your daughter. And that's what you did. You didn't freeze. You got into that flight mode, which sometimes feels the same because it's the same adrenaline.
They're on the same fight, flight, or freeze are all of our fear responses.
Right.
And, you know, and I think that Jen makes a really good point. And that's exactly what she did, is she was experiencing something in the now and something from the past at the same time. But her authentic self behaved appropriately to keep her and her daughter safe. And then she was able to she kind of probably got overwhelmed by the feelings from the past, but she reached out, she asked for help from her coaches so that she could discern the truth of today while also knowing the truth of before. So there was some radical acceptance in there. There's some mindfulness tools in there. There's asking for help in there, and, you know, growing her relationship with herself and her daughter in there.
Right.
So there's all these layers of things that are going on. So we don't work with people in 3 sessions. Our signature program is 3 months, and our foundations program is an ongoing subscription program. You know, we're in this for the long haul with folks. It's not just you're going to go, like in mental health therapy, you're lucky if you get more than 12 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we try to make it very reasonable and affordable and possible for people to work with us over the long haul, and then to also do more intensive work in a 3-month program if they need that.
Sure.
So, because this is not a quick fix. You know, Jennifer and I spent 2.5 years apart. 2 of those were doing solo work. You know, and I was very focused on building my relationship with myself, making sure that I totally knew how to do self-care, so that when I did get into a relationship again, if I ever did, I could maintain that self-care in the relationship. So there's all these different facets of it. It's amazingly complex and interesting and exciting.
Definitely.
And personalized.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's going to be totally different.
Yes.
Right. As I said, our client reached out yesterday, and she had originally reached out like at 1:00 in the morning because she lives in California. And so there's a 3-hour time difference. And she had sent us a text at 1:30. Are you two still up? And, you know, obviously we were not. And so in the morning I reached out knowing that she was probably still sleeping, said, you know, when you wake up, if you need to chat, reach out, you know, so we make ourselves as available as we can.
Sure.
Because, you know, that's what it's all about. Our mission is to bring more love to this planet. And that means one person at a time, one relationship at a time, one moment at a time. It is just our mission.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love it. I mean, that's what we're here to do, like ultimately, is just to spread more love. So it's really amazing.
Absolutely.
What are you said something that I really wanted to key into there. You said it's really important to maintain that self-love even once you're in a relationship. I think that it can be really easy to become enmeshed when you are in a relationship with somebody, whether it be, I know there are lots of people who, kind of dive in head first and their friends have a hard time getting a hold of them early on in a relationship. And I think that is kind of normal and somewhat normal, of course, in the honeymoon stage. But how do you, when you've been together for so long and, this person feels like, I hate the phrase, like my other half, right? We're two fucking full people.
Right.
Right.
But I what do you do to maintain that sense of self and that self-love, when this other person is such a huge part of your life? You live with them, in your case, you work with them, you co-parent with them. How do you maintain that individuality while in a relationship still?
We just know that is what brought us back together. That there was absolutely no way that we were going to be able to get back together if we didn't take care of our own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't love me, I can't expect Stephanie to love me. So, in your relationship, you need to realize that if you don't take care of you, you're not showing up in your relationship as your true self.
Sure.
Part of being authentic is taking care of your own needs. It is not selfish in any way. It's selfless. And when I didn't take care of me, I had nothing to give. So people need to realize, and I agree with you, that whole thing of, oh, my other half, or you complete me. No,
Ugh.
I complete you. I complete me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I complete me and you complete you, then wow, what a relationship we can have. Because then when we are together, we're showing up 100%. So we have to focus on that. And when we don't and our relationship suffers, we call each other out and say, hey, wait a minute. What have you done for yourself lately? Or, you said you wanted to go do this and you haven't done it. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
To make sure we hold each other accountable. This is work that we do every day to keep our relationship strong.
Yeah. And I think, if you, the behaviors that we have to do that, to maintain it, is we need to self-manage our schedules and what we love. So there's a couple of things that I really love to do that Jennifer's not so keen on. I play the guitar and she doesn't play an instrument. She loves to listen to me,
But I can't play.
she can't play. So I make sure that I'm playing most days of the week. I would say I practice at least 5 out of 7 days. And my teacher friends would tell me that's not enough. And yes, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, I'll do better. I love to mountain bike. That is not something that Jennifer can do with her physical struggles. So I am making sure that I get out on my bike on some rugged trails because that makes me feel alive.
And she still does flat ones with me.
And I do. So I do some with Jen and I do some by myself. And it's probably one of the hardest things that I do. I can't speak for Jennifer, but I know for me, breaking the habit of being completely enmeshed with her is a huge issue for me and something that I am conscious of every day to make sure that I'm doing stuff for me. And I will tell you, when I struggle, I fall off of this immensely. So if you're out there and you're thinking it's not possible, I totally get you, because it is an incredibly difficult habit to break. I grew up in a family that expected me to not be Stephanie. They expected me to be their minion and to be there for them and to do what they needed to do. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. That was part of my conditioning. So undoing that conditioning when I'm feeling rough is really hard, because when I'm feeling rough, that's when all that old stuff is coming up and I'm playing the old tapes. And so I don't go mountain biking. And so I have to force myself. I literally have to schedule it and make myself do it. So that's one of the things that you might have to do. And we're not talking about just taking a bath or meditating. It's like, what do you love? What do you love to do? Make sure you're doing it at least once in a while and schedule it and and hold yourself accountable for these things.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And that sense of individuality is necessary, and being able to have like your own relationships outside of each other.
Yes.
Absolutely. We teach, one of the things that we do teach is about, different types of relationships. And we talk a lot about, codependency and what that looks like. We talk about independent relationships and what that looks like, for people who, every once in a while get together, but for the most part, their lives are very separate. There's that type of relationship. And then we talk about the most healthy, which is interdependent. And we teach a lot about that and what that looks like. And how there are times that, like a Venn diagram, you come together and you do things together. But there's also the other part of the circle that is you and your individuality.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that is the most healthy type of relationship. And so, we teach a lot about that. And we make sure, because we were so codependent. It was terrible how codependent our relationship became. And that is why it fell apart. But that was what we know. We were raised to be codependent and to be that. So, it's stuff that we have to keep, bringing to the front part of our brain on a regular basis to say, wait a minute, I need to not be enmeshed.
Yeah.
Codependency isn't healthy.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't love Stephanie. It means I love her more because I love me.
Right. Right. Yeah. I always tell my boyfriend that, I say, I love you more than I have ever loved another man. And I would be devastated, if we weren't together. And then I say, but I love me more. And if you get in the way of me loving me, then I'm going to have to say goodbye.
Right. Good for you.
Good for you. Because there are so many people that are not willing to say that.
Yeah. I mean,
but the more you love you, the better you show up.
Exactly. And the better the relationship's going to be. So
Absolutely.
I think do you talk about the different forms of healthy bonds, healthy attachment styles?
Yes.
We do.
Yes, we do teach on attachment styles and, the anxious attacher, and,
avoidant
the
attacher.
avoidant. And so we do. We teach people about all these because, if you're not aware of it, then you can't really make changes.
Know. Yeah,
Right.
Totally.
Right.
So we do bring in psychology where it's needed, and we bring in spirituality where it's needed, and we bring in science where it's needed.
We both are total neurobiology geeks.
Yeah, and that's why we call ourselves quantum relationship coaches, because we love the idea of quantum energy and, teaching the science of that. People are like, oh, so yeah, we're very much science geeks.
Yeah, no, I am too. I mean, I think that's why I started this. On that note, I kind of have one science-y relationship question for you and one more spirituality one. And they're kind of like the personality thing. The first is, what are your zodiac signs?
I am a Pisces.
And I'm a Scorpio.
Ooh, you both have that water energy. Okay.
We are water energy.
And then the more lengthy one is what are your love languages?
For me, it is touch is one of I think is my top love language. That's my primary.
And mine is acts of service.
Okay.
And my secondary is acts of service.
That's good. Yeah. I think it's really cool how love languages can be the way that you give and receive can be a little bit different depending on the person that you're with. You have to
absolutely
kind of
that is really, really important because, if, one of you has touch as your love language and the other one who has it like the very last one possible, that that is not their form of connection. You need to figure things out of how, or if, for both of us, receiving gifts, that's one of the love languages.
Yes, it is.
It's our least, both of us. It's like, it's not that important.
Yeah.
I know you love me. You don't need to shower me with all these gifts. It's just not necessary. So, that helps for both of us.
Yeah.
That neither one of us really care about that much. Yeah. Is it nice every once in a while? Absolutely. But, you don't need to, on Valentine's Day, I don't know if we've ever given each other cards. We just don't think it's necessary.
Yep.
You know, we need to show each other that we love each other every day of the year.
Yep, absolutely. And it's funny too that like, you know, the way like gifts is my bottom of ways to receive, but it's actually one of my go-tos for ways to show love for people.
That is me too. Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
And Stephanie, you always thought like, you know, because I love to give gifts that I must love to receive them. And when she found out that was like my least on the list of my love languages, I think she was a little like puzzled.
Puzzled and relieved.
Right, because she doesn't like to give.
I don't. I mean, I don't. For me, it's like I want to show you in other ways, not by buying stuff. You know, I would much rather find a bouquet of flowers, you know, out on the side of the road and bring them to you than go buy a bouquet.
Right.
So it was like, oh, really? So you're not upset with me for not buying you something on the last 12 holidays? Great.
But yes, but I do love to give.
Yeah.
I do love to give. It's just who I am. So yeah, it's always so interesting. And, you know, it's just nice to know, you know, how our brains tick a little bit when it comes to relationships, because sometimes you are so opposite that, you know, I mean, we hate to have to tell people that, you know, I don't know if there's any saving this relationship, but we also don't pull any punches and saying, what do you see in this relationship that's worth saving?
Right.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably a good way of asking that question or sharing that bad news. Yeah. No, it's funny. The love language thing, like I think my partner asked me on our second date and we realized that our love languages are identical.
Interesting. Nice. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, you want to talk about like spiritual things happening, the universe sending you things. Like he was sent into my life 4 years ago, exactly when he needed to be.
Nice.
So, very, very funny. But why don't you tell me about where people can find you? Where can they sign up to work with you? Where can they read more about your story, more about you as individuals? Just kind of take this time to let people know, you know, where they can find you and follow you.
Well, the easiest place is to go to www.enchantedawakenings.love. And that's our website, which will lead you to all of our other things. But if you're a Facebooker, you can find us as a group under Enchanted Awakenings. And that's our free Facebook group that anyone can join. We just have a couple questions to make sure that you fit the group well. And that is a well-moderated group for you to kind of get a taste of what we do and see if there's anything of interest in the work that we do together.
Yeah, we teach in there every week. You know, we teach every week in there for free. We do a 30-minute training every Thursday for our folks. And then, as Stephanie said, you know, we have other programs. We have our monthly subscription program and also our signature program, which is much more intense in what we do. And all that information is on our website as well, to be able to see all the different programs we offer. So that is where people can find us.
That is so cool. Well, yeah, are there any last thoughts you want to share? Any last pieces of advice before we sign off here?
Remember that every person that you come into contact with is a relationship. And so looking at your relationship styles and your relationship history will improve your life in every area.
Perfect. Yeah.
And for me is be open and willing to look at things that maybe you've never thought of before or haven't embarked on. Because I know for me, if I hadn't found my spiritual path, that life would not be where it is today. And I had to be willing and be open to look at something that I had never heard of or thought of before to really find who I was and then be able to know how to show up in the world and in relationships.
Beautiful. Well, Jennifer and Stephanie, thank you both so much for being here today. Next time that I drive from Philly to Michigan, I'll see if you guys want to meet up for like a coffee or something.
We would love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But thank you so much for your time, for, you know, your vulnerability and for sharing your story.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for having us.
And listeners, thank you for listening. My name is Rachel Dalton, and this has been Wine, Dine, and 69, and let's keep talking.